It's late, just before 9 on a Friday evening in August, and I am sitting on my lanai here in Sarasota, listening to the gentle nightly chorus of the tree frogs. I have always found this sound to be a comfort, a sign that the world is in its proper, peaceful order. But tonight, it brings no comfort. Tonight, the world is a fractured, silent place, and I am the one who broke it. My son Michael is not speaking to me. And my parents, the two people who have been the sun and moon of my entire existence, are not speaking to me. I am 72 years old, and for the first time in my life, I feel completely and utterly orphaned. I am writing this down, I suppose, to try and make sense of it all, to present my case to the great anonymous jury of the world and ask the question that is haunting me. Am I the asshole? It all began, as so many light and life reckonings do, on my birthday. It began with a gift. My 72nd birthday was a quiet, sun-drenched, and utterly perfect Florida affair. We celebrated at my parents' condo in the main building of our sprawling, manicured retirement community. Robert and Mary Vance, my parents, had moved down here from Pennsylvania a decade ago. And I, a recent widow, had followed them a few years later, buying my own small villa just a short golf cart ride away. We had recreated our little family unit here under the warm, forgiving sun. The party was a small gathering. My parents, my son Michael, his wife Sarah, and my two beautiful grandchildren, Chloe and Noah. My parents' condo was filled with the happy, chaotic sounds of family. The children were showing me their latest school art projects. Michael was telling a long, rambling story about a new client at his law firm. And my mother, Mary, was fussing over everyone, a tiny, energetic hummingbird of a woman, ensuring everyone's glass of iced tea was full. My father, Robert, a man whose quiet, steady presence had been the bedrock of my entire life, sat in his favorite armchair, a look of deep, contented pride on his face as he watched the scene unfold. I sat there, in the midst of it all, and my heart was full to the point of bursting. I looked at the faces of the people I loved, and I felt a wave of profound, almost overwhelming gratitude. I had lived a good life, a beautiful life. I had been married for 45 wonderful years to my late husband, Richard, a kind, gentle man who had made me laugh every single day. I had raised a good, successful son. I had built a career I loved, spending 30 years as the head librarian in our small Pennsylvania town. And at the center of it all, the two fixed points around which my entire world had always revolved were my parents. They were 92 and 93 now, their bodies frail, but their minds as sharp as ever. They were my beginning, my history, and my greatest blessing. And they had chosen me. That was the one single defining fact of my life that was always present, a quiet, unspoken chord humming beneath the melody of my otherwise normal existence. I was adopted. It was never a secret. I had always known. Robert and Mary Vance had been unable to have children of their own, and they had adopted me, a newborn baby. In 1953, their story of how they got me was the central myth of our family, a tale they had told me 100 times. They had received a call from a Catholic adoption agency in Philadelphia. A young, unmarried girl, they were told, had just given birth and had made the loving, selfless decision to give her baby up for a better life. It was a closed adoption. The records were sealed. It was. They had explained to me, for everyone's protection, for the young girl's, so she could go on with her life without the shame and stigma of the era. And for ours, so we could be a real, complete, and unthreatened family, They had given me everything: a life of security, of love, of boundless opportunity. And in return, I had learned very early on that there was one door that must always, always remain closed. My curiosity about my biological origins was the one thing that could cause a flicker of deep, profound pain to appear in my mother's otherwise joyful eyes. I remember asking, when I was about 7 years old, "Mommy, do you think my other mommy had blonde hair? Like me?" My mother had frozen, her hand hovering over the cookie dough she was rolling. Her smile had tightened just a fraction. "I don't know, sweetie," she had said, her voice a little too bright. "You're mommy, and I love your blonde hair." She had changed the subject then, and I had learned my lesson. To ask about them was to hurt her, and hurting my parents was, to me, the greatest sin imaginable. So I had stopped asking. I had packed away my curiosity, my wonderings about the woman who had given me my blonde hair and my blue eyes, and I had put it in a small locked box in the back of my mind. My parents were my parents. My life was my life. The story of my beginning was a short, simple, and sealed chapter. And for 72 years, that had been enough. "Okay, Mom, time for your gift," Michael announced, pulling me from my reverie. He was holding a brightly wrapped rectangular box, a wide, excited grin on his face. "Oh, Michael, you shouldn't have. I said the familiar, happy ritual beginning." "Of course I should have," he laughed. "This is a good one. It's for all of us, really." I took the box and carefully unwrapped it. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, was a sleek, modern green and white box. On the front, in a clean sans serif font, were the words "Ancestry DNA." "What is it?" my mother asked, leaning forward with a look of polite curiosity. "It's a DNA testing kit, Grandma, my granddaughter," Chloe chirped. "You spit in a tube, and it tells you where you come from. We did it at school for a project. I'm 32% Irish." Michael beamed. "I thought it would be fun, Mom," he said. "We can finally fill out the family tree for good. We can see if we're really related to Scottish royalty, like Grandpa Robert always claims." It was such a simple, innocent, and deeply modern gift. It was a fun scientific game, a way to connect with a distant, impersonal history. Michael, who had grown up in a world where information was free and accessible, where secrets were things to be uncovered, not kept, had no concept of the Pandora's box he had just placed in my hands. But I knew. And as I looked at the faces of my parents, I knew that they knew. The change in the room was subtle, but to me, it was a seismic shift. The warm, happy, celebratory atmosphere of my birthday party suddenly felt fragile. My mother's smile had become a tight, brittle thing. She reached for her husband's hand, her knuckles white. My father, who had been laughing at his own joke about being related to Robert the Bruce, had gone completely, unnaturally still. His face was a blank, unreadable mask, his eyes fixed on the small green and white box in my lap as if it were a venomous snake. "Oh," my mother finally said, her voice a little too high, a little too bright. "A little science kit. How? Modern? Doesn't seem very reliable to me," my father added, his voice a low, gruff rumble. He was attempting to sound dismissive, but I could hear the faint, underlying tremor of fear. "Why would you need to spit in a tube to know your history? You're a Vance. Your great-grandfather helped build the first library in our hometown. That's all the history anyone needs." He was talking about his history, not mine. Michael and Sarah, bless their innocent, well-adjusted hearts, were completely oblivious to the sudden, icy undercurrent in the room. Ah! They started talking about the funny results their friends had gotten, about the surprising discoveries they had made. And I just sat there, holding the kit. I felt a strange, dizzying sense of vertigo. I was caught between two worlds. The world I knew, the world of my loving, devoted, and now terrified parents. And the world I didn't know, the world of my own biological history. A world that was suddenly, tantalizingly within reach. The lifelong habit of protecting my parents' feelings. Of keeping that one single door in my life firmly closed was at war with a new and surprisingly powerful, feeling the curiosity of a 72-year-old woman who was suddenly acutely aware that she was in the final chapter of her life. Okay. And that she still had no idea how her own story had truly begun. The party wound down soon after. Michael hugged me goodbye, leaving the DNA kit on the coffee table. "You have to let us know if you have any royal blood, Mom," he said with a laugh, after they had all gone. I helped my parents clean up. We moved in a strange, tense silence. They did not mention the kit again. But its presence was a loud, screaming thing in the middle of the room as I was about to leave to take the short golf cart ride back to my own condo. My mother took my hand. Her hand was trembling slightly. "You have been the greatest gift of our lives, Eleanor," she whispered, her eyes full of a desperate, pleading love. "The only gift we ever needed." I knew what she was really saying. Don't do it. Don't open that door. Please, let us be enough. I went home to my quiet, empty villa. I sat on my lanai, the DNA kit on the table in front of me. It's cheerful. Modern branding a stark contrast to the ancient, complex turmoil in my heart. I looked at the kit, and then I looked at the framed photo on my side table. A picture of my parents on their wedding day, young, happy, and full of a love that they had so generously and so completely given to me. I owed them everything. My life, my happiness, my very being. Didn't I owe them this too? This one final act of protective silence. But then I thought of myself, of the little girl who had wondered about her mother's hair, of the quiet, unanswered question that had lived in the back of my mind for 72 years. The question of who? The question of why? I was a librarian, a keeper of stories. And my own was a book with a missing first chapter. I opened the box, and in the quiet, humid Florida night, I made a choice. For the first time in my life, I chose my own unknown story over the comfortable, familiar story of my parents' peace of mind. I carefully swabbed my cheek, placed the sample in the vial, and sealed the return envelope. The rebellion of my life was not a teenage tantrum. It was a quiet, clinical, and deeply personal act of mailing a letter. I am writing this on a Friday night, and the air here on my lanai is thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the promise of a weekend storm. It was a night just like this, a few months ago, that I mailed the letter that would ultimately bring the storm to my own quiet, peaceful life. The 6 weeks that followed the dispatch of my DNA sample were a masterclass in familial tension. My parents and I, a trio that had once moved with the easy, comfortable rhythm of a lifetime of love, were now engaged in a strange and stilted dance. We still had our weekly dinners, our canasta games, our gentle, sun-drenched Florida retirement routines. But a new unspoken character had joined us at the table, the small Greenland white box that I had dared to open. My parents' strategy was one of aggressive, almost frantic reaffirmation. They began to speak of our family history, their family history, with a new and desperate frequency. My father, Robert, would find any excuse to launch into a long, rambling story about his great-grandfather. A stern-looking man and a photograph on their mantelpiece, who had apparently been a celebrated ship's captain out of Boston. My mother, Mary, would reminisce constantly about my childhood. Her stories always subtly, carefully, reinforcing the narrative of my perfect, complete, and utterly non-negotiable place within the Vance family. "Do you remember your 5th birthday party, Eleanor?" she asked one afternoon, her voice a little too bright. "Your father rented a pony, a real pony. You were so thrilled you didn't let go of its reins for 3 hours." "I remember," I said with a quiet smile. It was a beautiful memory, but I understood its new purpose. It was not just a reminiscence. It was a piece of evidence. It was Exhibit A in the unstated, ongoing trial of my gratitude. "We gave you a pony," the story said. "What more could you possibly need?" They never asked about the kit. They never asked. If I had sent it in, they just built a fortress of their own love and history around me, hoping, I think, to make the walls so high that my curiosity would never be able to peek over them. And I, in my own quiet way, played my part. I listened to their stories. I did not mention the small, sealed envelope that was now making its way across the country to a laboratory in Utah. I protected them from my own quiet, 72-year-old rebellion. It was a kindness. And it was a lie. During those weeks of waiting, I found myself thinking, for the first time in a long time, about my late husband. Richard had been a quiet, thoughtful man, an engineer who saw the world as a series of elegant, interconnected systems. He had been my anchor for 45 years, and his absence was a constant, low-grade ache in my heart. He had been the only person in the world with whom I had ever dared to open the locked box of my own history, just a crack. I remembered one evening years ago. We were sitting on the porch of our old house in Pennsylvania, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance. Our own son Michael was upstairs, a brand new baby, sleeping in his crib. I had been overwhelmed in those early days of motherhood by the sheer biological force of my love for him. The feeling of looking at his tiny, perfect face and seeing a faint echo of my own features. Of Richard's nose, of a history that was visible, tangible. I wonder if I look like her. I had whispered into the darkness, the thought slipping. Out unplanned and unbidden, Richard hadn't asked who her was. He just knew. He reached over and took my hand. "I'm sure you do," he'd said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "And I'm sure she was beautiful. My parents, my real parents. They never want to talk about it," I'd said. "It hurts them. It makes them feel like they weren't." "Enough. You know that's not true," he'd said, squeezing my hand. "And they know it too. But fear is an irrational thing, Ellie. Their love for you is so big, they're terrified of losing even a tiny piece of it." He had paused then, looking out at the dark yard. But it's your story too, not just theirs. And you have a right to every chapter of it. If you ever want to search, if you ever want to know, I will be right here beside you." Cried then, a quiet, grateful cry for his understanding. But I had never taken him up on his offer. The fear of hurting my parents had always been greater than my need to know. But now, with Richard gone, with my own life entering its final quiet act, his words from that long-ago summer night came back to me as a kind of permission. "It's your story, too." The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks and 2 days after I had mailed the sample. The subject line was a simple declarative S, an utterly heart-stopping sentence. Your ancestry DNA results are in. I stared at it for a long, silent moment. I was in my own condo, sitting at my small kitchen table, a half-finished cup of tea growing. Cold beside me, I could just not open it. I could delete the email, throw the entire Pandora's box of my own genetics into the digital trash, and my parents would never have to know. We could go back to our strange, polite, tense dance and the quiet. Orderly peace of our lives would be restored, but I knew I couldn't. The door had been unlocked, and I had to know what was on the other side. My hand was trembling slightly as I clicked the link. I was taken to a bright, cheerful, and deeply impersonal website. The first thing I saw was the ancestry estimate, a colorful pie chart that broke my entire genetic history down into a series of neat, clean percentages. 52%. England and Northwestern Europe. 38% Scotland. 6% Ireland. 4% Wales. It was almost exactly what my father, Robert, had always proudly claimed. It was anticlimactic. I felt a strange, foolish wave of disappointment. Was that it? A confirmation of a family story that wasn't even mine. And then I saw the other tab, a small, unassuming tab at the top of the page. It was labeled DNA Relatives. My breath caught in my throat. This was the real door. I hesitated for a moment, my cursor hovering over the button. Then I clicked The Page Loaded. At the very top, in a large green banner, were the words that would cleave my life into a before and an after. We found a potential first. Degree relative for you. I could not breathe. My mind was a blank, white static. A degree. Relative. A parent. A child. Or a full sibling. My mind raced through the logical impossibilities. My parents were my parents. My only child was Michael. It had to be a mistake. A glitch in their algorithm. My shaking finger clicked on the View Match button. The page that loaded was a simple profile, a name, an age, a small grainy profile. Picture and a relationship. Samuel Burke. Age 74. Predicted relationship. Brother. I stared at the word. Brother. I was an only child. I had spent 72 years as an only child. The very concept of having a brother was so alien, so impossible. It felt like a word from another language. And then I looked at the picture. It was a photo of an old man, a man with kind, crinkly eyes and a gentle, slightly lopsided smile, standing in front of what looked like a university library. He had white hair, but the set of his jaw, the shape of his nose, and the clear, intelligent blue of his eyes. It was like looking at a stranger and somehow seeing my own reflection. I was looking at my own eyes, my own smile. I felt a sound escape my throat, a small, choked, half sob, half laugh. The locked box in the back of my mind. The one where I had stored 72 years of quiet, unanswered questions had just been blown wide open. I scrolled down the page. There was a section where you could send a message to your DNA relatives. And there was a message waiting for me. It had been sent 2 years ago, a hopeful digital missive cast into the void. Waiting for a relative who might never appear. Subject, hoping to find a connection. To whom it may concern. The message began, the tone cautious, gentle, and deeply. Respectful, my name is Samuel Burke. I was born in Philadelphia in 1951. and was adopted shortly after my birth through a Catholic adoption agency. I was told that my birth mother was a young, unmarried Irish-American girl, and that she had passed away shortly after giving birth to me. I have lived a full and happy life with a wonderful adoptive family, but I have always wondered if I had any other biological relatives out there in the world. I know that this kind of contact can be unexpected and perhaps even unwelcome. I want to respect your privacy above all else. But if you are a part of my story and if you are open to it, I would be so honored to simply know you exist. Sincerely, Samuel. I read his message 3 times, the tears that I had been holding back now streaming down my face. A brother, an older brother, a 74-year-old history professor, according to his profile, who had been looking for me. The shock, the disbelief, it all began to recede, replaced by a complex, overwhelming cascade of emotions. A profound, aching sadness for the 72 years we had lost, for the lifetime of siblinghood that had been stolen from us. A fierce, protective anger at the secrets, at the sealed records, at the system that had kept us apart, and a strange, new and utterly exhilarating feeling of joy, a feeling of connection. I was not just a single, isolated branch grafted onto another family's tree. I had roots. I had a history. I had a brother. I sat there for a long, long time, just looking at his kind, familiar stranger's face on my computer screen. The question was not if I would reply. The question was not if I would meet him. The need to do so was a primal, undeniable force, a gravitational pull my soul could not resist. The only question now, the hard, painful, and terrifying question, was how I was going to tell the only parents I had ever known that the one door they had always insisted must remain closed was about to be opened. And I knew, with a deep and certain dread, that they would not see it as a discovery. They would see it as a betrayal. I'm writing this on a Friday night, and a summer storm is rolling in off the Gulf. I can hear the low, distant rumble of thunder. It sounds like the argument that is still echoing in my head, the one that took place in my parents' quiet, sun-drenched living room 3 months ago. Many of you commenting on my post have said that my parents' feelings are their own responsibility, that their insecurity is not my burden to carry. And on a logical, intellectual level, I know you are right. But love is not a logical thing. And the conversation where I told my parents about my brother was not a debate. It was an act of emotional surgery, performed without anesthesia, and I am not sure any of us have recovered. After I closed my laptop that Tuesday morning, the face of Samuel Burke, my brother, burned into my mind. I did not immediately reply to his message. To do so would have felt like a betrayal. For 72 years, my loyalty, my love, and my identity had been an exclusive contract with Robert and Mary Vance. Before I could welcome a new person into my story, I had to, as a matter of honor, inform the story's primary authors. I sat on my lanai for a long time, the gentle Florida breeze doing nothing to cool the frantic, anxious heat in my own chest. I rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 times, trying on different combinations of words like dresses for a difficult occasion. I would be gentle. I would be reassuring. I would wrap the hard, sharp truth in the softest, most loving language I possessed. Finally, I picked up the phone. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice its usual cheerful chirp. "Eleanor, I was just thinking about you, honey. Your father and I were wondering if you wanted to join us for a game of bridge tonight." That sounds lovely, Mom, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, distant. But actually, I was hoping I could come over now. There's something important I'd like to talk to you and Dad about. The line went quiet for a moment. The cheerful energy vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp anxiety. She knew. Of course she knew. There was only one important thing I could possibly have to talk to them about. Is this about, Kit dear? She asked, her voice now a tight, worried whisper. Yes, Mom, I said. It is. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The golf cart ride from my small villa to their condominium building was the longest journey of my life. I drove past the perfectly manicured gardens of our retirement community, past the cheerful pastel-colored buildings, past my smiling, waving neighbors. The world was a picture of serene, orderly peace, a stark, brutal contrast to the chaotic, messy, and life-altering conversation I was about to have. They were waiting for me in their living room. They were not sitting together on the couch. My father was standing by the window, his back to me, staring out at the golf course. My mother was sitting in her favorite armchair, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. The air in the room was thick with a tense, unspoken dread. They had been waiting for this moment, I realized, for 72 years. The knock on the door from the past they had so desperately tried to outrun. I sat down on the couch, the floral print cushions sighing under my weight. I did not know where to begin, so I began with the only truth that mattered. I love you both, I said, my voice quiet in the silent room. More than words can ever say, you are my parents. You are my only parents. You have given me the most beautiful, most wonderful life a person could ever ask for. And nothing, not a single thing in this world could ever change that, or diminish the love and the gratitude I feel for you. I need you to know that. I need you to believe that. My mother's eyes were already filling with tears. My father did not turn from the window. The DNA kit, I continued, my voice gentle. Michael meant it as a fun, silly gift. I didn't expect to find anything. I thought it would just be a list of countries my ancestors came from. The word felt strange on my tongue, but it found something else. It found a person. A living person. I took a deep breath. This was it. The precipice. The test found a match for me, I said. A first-degree relative. I have a brother. A full biological brother. He's 74 years old. He was also adopted. He's been looking for his family for a very long time. My mother let out a small, wounded sound. A soft, choking sob. My father finally turned from the window. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were full of a deep, profound, and heartbreaking pain. It was the look of a man who was experiencing his oldest and most deeply held fear come to life. And I said, my own voice now trembling slightly as I delivered the final, fatal blow to their peace of mind. I have decided that I would like to meet him. The dam of their carefully constructed composure. The one that had held back a lifetime of insecurity. Just broke. No, my mother whispered, the word a desperate pleading prayer. She shook her head, the tears now streaming down her face. Eleanor? No. Why? After all this time? Why? Because he's my brother, I said, my voice full of a simple, aching wonder. I have a brother. Don't you see how? Miraculous. That is what I see, my father said, his voice a low, angry growl as he walked to the center of the room, is a betrayal. The word hit me with a physical force. A betrayal, I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. How is this a betrayal? This has nothing to do with you. This is about a part of my own story that I never knew existed. It has everything to do with us." He shot back, his face now flushed with a pained, righteous anger. "We are your story. We have been your entire story for 72 years. We took you in. We gave you our name. We gave you our love. We gave you everything. And now, at the end of our lives, you tell us it wasn't enough, that you need to go looking for strangers, for the children of the woman who gave you away." "She didn't just give me away, Robert." My mother sobbed from her chair. "She chose us. She chose us to be your parents because she knew she couldn't be. We were chosen." This was their narrative, the one they had built their entire parental identity upon. And my simple human curiosity was a wrecking ball, threatening to smash it to pieces. "This is not a rejection of you," I pleaded, my heart breaking for their pain, a pain I could not seem to soothe. "My love for you and my curiosity about where I came from are two completely separate things. My heart is big enough to hold both. Why can't you see that?" "Because we see what this is," my father said, his voice thick with a lifetime of repressed fear. "This is the beginning of an ending. You will meet this man, and he will have stories for you. And pictures and a history. History that we are not a part of. And slowly, piece by piece, you will be pulled away from us. You will be pulled back to them, the blood family. That is the most ridiculous, most hurtful thing you have ever said to me," I said, my own voice now trembling with a new emotion, frustration. "I am 72 years old. I am not a child who is going to run away from home. I am a grown woman who has just been given a small, miraculous, and completely unexpected new piece of her own personal puzzle. And I just want to see what it looks like." My mother stood up, her small body shaking with sobs. She came to me and clutched my hands. Her hands were so frail, so bird-like. "Please, Eleanor," she begged. Her eyes, the loving brown eyes I had looked into my entire life for comfort, now full of a desperate, pleading terror. "Please don't do this. We are 93 years old. We don't have much time left. Just let us be enough for you. For the little time we have left, please, don't break our hearts." It was the most profound, most effective, and most deeply unfair act of emotional blackmail I had ever experienced. They were asking me to choose their peace of mind or my own truth, their comfort or my closure. They were framing my desire to know myself as a direct, mortal wound to them, and I sat there, on their floral print couch, in their sun-drenched, love-filled home, caught between the two people I owed everything to, and a brother I had never known. The choice was impossible. It was a choice between my past and my present, between gratitude and identity, between a closed door and a new, terrifying, and wonderfully open one. And I knew, as I looked at their two beloved, terrified faces, that no matter what I chose, someone's heart was going to be broken. I just had to decide if it was going to be theirs or my own. It is Friday night, and the storm I could hear rumbling in the distance an hour ago is finally here. The rain is lashing against my windows, and the palm trees outside are thrashing in the wind. It feels appropriate. The weather, for once, is a perfect match for the turmoil in my own heart. I'm reading the comments on my post, and so many of you are saying the same thing. You are not responsible for your parents' feelings. It is a simple, logical, and deeply rational statement. And it is the single hardest lesson a person can learn in their life. I left my parents' condo that afternoon, their tearful, wounded ultimatum echoing in my ears, and I have never in. My 72 years felt so utterly, completely, and painfully alone. I retreated to my own quiet villa, a space that had always been my sanctuary, but now felt like a holding cell. I was a woman torn in two. One half of me, the daughter they had raised, was consumed by a deep and profound guilt. I saw my mother's tear-streaked face. I heard my father's voice, thick with a lifetime of love and a moment of perceived betrayal. They had given me a perfect life. They had rescued me from an unknown fate and had wrapped me in a cocoon of safety and affection. And now, at the very end of their lives, I had repaid them with this. A selfish, childish whim, a need to know a story that didn't matter. A story whose discovery was causing them an agony I could barely comprehend. My heart ached with the pain I was inflicting upon them. I was a monster. A cruel, ungrateful child. But the other half of me, a part I was only just getting to know. A part that had been dormant for 72 years was whispering a different story. It was the part of me that had stared at the photograph of Samuel Burke, at his kind, familiar, stranger's eyes. And it felt a sense of connection so profound it was like a physical hum in my bones. He is my brother. The words were a simple, biological fact. A fact that had existed every single day of my life, a secret I had unknowingly carried. To deny that fact, to turn my back on it, to pretend he did not exist, that felt like a betrayal too. A betrayal of him. A betrayal of the young, scared mother who had given us both life. And a betrayal of myself, of the little girl who had, once so innocently, asked about her mother's hair. I spent the rest of that day adrift in a sea of indecision, tossed between the powerful opposing currents of gratitude and identity. I looked at the photos that filled my home, a lifetime of happy memories with the Vance family. Me on the pony my father had rented, me in my cap and gown at my college graduation, my parents looking on with beaming pride. A photo from my wedding. Day my father walking me down the aisle, his face a perfect picture of paternal love. They were my parents. They were my story. How could I possibly risk that for a ghost? For a name on a screen? But then I would open my laptop and look at his. Picture again Samuel. I would read his message, his gentle, respectful words. And I would feel that undeniable pull, the call of blood to blood, a history that was written in my very DNA. The war inside me raged. I made coffee I didn't drink. I stared out at the perfect green expanse of the golf course and saw nothing. By the time evening fell, I knew I could not solve this equation on my own. I needed to talk to someone who was not a part of the original, tangled knot of my own history. I needed my son. Michael answered on the second ring, his voice full of the easy, cheerful warmth that had always been a comfort to me. Hey, Mom, how was the birthday lunch? Did Grandpa Robert tell his Robert the Bruce story again? He did, I said, a small watery laugh escaping me. Michael, is now a good time to talk? I need your advice. The cheerful note in his voice vanished, replaced by a serious concern. Of course, Mom. What is it? What's wrong? And so I told him. I told him everything. I told him about the DNA results, about the discovery of my brother, Samuel. I read him the message Samuel had sent. And then, my voice trembling, I told him about the conversation I had just had with my parents. I told him about their tears, their anger, their accusations of betrayal. I told him about their final, heartbreaking plea, "Let us be enough." When I finished, the line was silent for a long moment. "Mom," he finally said, and his voice was full of a deep, quiet anger that surprised me. "That is the most profoundly unfair thing I have ever heard. They're just scared, honey," I said. My lifelong habit of defending them, of managing their emotions, kicking in. They're old. They're afraid of losing me. "Ah, losing you?" he asked, his voice now rising with incredulity. "Mom, you are their 72-year-old daughter. You live in the same retirement community. You play bridge with them twice a week. Where exactly do they think you are going to go?" He took a deep, steadying breath. "I am so sorry. I'm sorry that my gift, something that was supposed to be fun, has caused this. I had no idea they were still so fragile about it all. It's not your fault, Michael," I said. "They have always been this way. I have always chosen to protect them from it. Not ask the questions, and now I have, and I've broken their hearts. And I don't know what to do." He said, his voice now calm, logical, the voice of the lawyer he was. "Let's look at the facts. Fact 1, you were adopted. Fact 2, you have your entire life been a perfect, loving, and deeply grateful daughter to the people who raised you. Fact 3, through a random act of science, you have discovered that you have a biological sibling you never knew existed. And fact 4, you have a natural, human, and completely valid desire to know this person, this piece of your own story." He paused. "None of those facts, Mom, in any way, shape, or form diminishes, negates, or threatens the love you have for Grandpa and Grandma. They are not mutually exclusive. This is not a zero-sum game. And the fact that they are trying to frame it as one, it's not about their love for you. It's about their own lifelong insecurity. And as much as you love them, you are not responsible for managing their insecurities. Not anymore." His words, so simple, so logical, so full of the unconditional support my own husband had once offered me, were a lifeline. He was giving me permission to do the one thing I had never been able to do for myself, to prioritize my own needs. "You have a right to every chapter of your own story, Mom," he said, his voice echoing the words his father had spoken so many years ago. "All of them. You have spent your entire life honoring their story. It is not a betrayal to finally, at the age of 72, take a little time to honor your own." We talked for another hour. He let me cry. He let me rage. He let me grieve for the simple, uncomplicated family I thought I had. And by the time we hung up, the war inside me was over. The guilt was still there, a dull, sad ache, but it was no longer in command. My son had given me a gift far greater than the DNA kit. He had given me clarity. He had given me my own permission back. I sat at my desk, the storm now raging outside my window. A fitting soundtrack to the quiet revolution that was taking place in my heart. I opened my laptop. I went to the website. I looked at his picture, at his kind, blue, familiar eyes. And I clicked reply. My fingers, which had been trembling all day, were now steady on the keyboard. The words came easily, as if they had been waiting for 72 years to be written. Subject, hoping to find a connection. "Dear Samuel, please Forgive my delay in responding. Your message and the information I received from the Ancestry site was, as I am sure you can imagine, the most profound shock of my life. I am still trying to process it all. My name is Eleanor. I was born in Philadelphia in 1953, and I was also adopted as a newborn through a Catholic agency. I am, I believe, the sister you have been looking for. To write those words, my sister, feels like a dream. Like you, I have lived a full, happy, and deeply blessed life. I was raised by the most wonderful, loving parents a person could ever ask for. I was a librarian. I was married for 45 years to a wonderful man who passed away a few years ago. I have one son and two beautiful grandchildren. My life has been full, and yet there has always been a quiet, unanswered question in the back of my mind, a missing first chapter. The story of my life has always begun on the day my parents brought me home. I have never known the story of the days that came before, to know that you exist, to see your face. It is a gift I cannot quite describe. The thought of having a brother, of having a history that is written in my own blood and bones, is both overwhelming and wonderful. My own family situation is delicate. My adoptive parents are elderly, and this discovery has been a shock to them as well. But this is my story too. And I agree with you. I would be so honored to simply know you. I am not sure what the next steps are, but I wanted to write to you immediately. I wanted you to know that you are not alone in your search anymore. Your sister has found you. With a sense of profound and hopeful wonder, Eleanor, I read the letter one last time. It was the truest, most honest thing I had ever written. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. The final act of rebellion. The quiet digital click that would change everything. I was choosing my own story. I was choosing myself. I clicked send. The message was gone. The die was cast. And in the quiet of my small villa, as the storm raged outside, I felt a sense of peace so deep, so profound. It was like the world had finally, after 72 long years, come into focus. I'm sitting here on my lanai on this warm, stormy Friday night in August, and I've been reading your comments. So many of you have shared your own beautiful and painful stories of adoption, of searching, of the complex, tangled webs of family. Thank you for that. The validation from strangers is a strange and unexpected comfort. To answer the question many of you have asked, the fallout with my parents was just as bad as I had feared. It was a cold, quiet, and deeply punishing war of silence. But the story did not end there. Because a week after I sent my email, I received a reply. And that reply changed the course of the rest of my life. The days following my great rebellion were some of the loneliest I have ever known. My parents, as I had expected, retreated into a fortress of wounded silence. My daily morning phone calls with my mother ceased. Our weekly bridge game was silently, indefinitely canceled. When I would see them, driving past in their golf cart, on their way to the community clubhouse, they would look straight ahead, their faces a pair of stiff, unforgiving masks. They were shunning me. They were trying to make my world so small, so lonely, that I would be forced to crawl back to them to apologize, to renounce my newfound brother and beg for my place in the only family I had ever known. And I must admit, in the dark, quiet hours of the night, their strategy almost worked. The guilt was a heavy, constant companion. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart aching with the pain I had caused them. They were in their 90s. Their love for me was the great defining truth of their lives. And I, in my selfish 72-year-old quest for a ghost, had shattered their peace. There were moments when I was tempted to pick up the phone, to capitulate, to say the words, "You're right. I'm sorry. I won't meet him." But then the email arrived. It was from Samuel. Subject: Eleanor. My sister, my dearest Eleanor, I have read and reread your message 100 times, and I still cannot quite believe it is real. To have spent a lifetime as an only child, and then at the age of 74, to discover I have a sister. It is a miracle for which I have no words. Joy is too small a word. It is a fundamental realignment of my entire universe. Please do not feel any need to apologize for your delay in responding. I can only imagine the shock you must be feeling. And I understand, more than you know, the delicacy of your situation with your parents. The love we have for the families that raised us is a profound and sacred thing. My own adoptive parents were the finest people I have ever known, and I miss them dearly. This discovery does not diminish that love. In my heart, it only adds to. It is not a replacement. It is an addition. A new, unexpected room in the house of your heart. I am a retired history professor. I live a quiet life in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I was married for 48 years to a wonderful woman named Clara, who passed away 3 years ago. I have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren who are the light of my life. And I have, for the past 20 years, been quietly, patiently looking for you. Please take all the time you need. Navigate your family's situation with the love and care it deserves. But know this, I am here, and I will wait for as long as it takes. Your brother has found you, and he is not going anywhere. With a sense of profound and hopeful wonder that I thought was no longer possible at my age. Samuel, I read his letter through a blur of tears. His words, his gentle, wise, and deeply empathetic understanding of my exact situation were a balm on my wounded soul. He did not demand. He did not push. He simply understood. He was a stranger, and yet he seemed to see me more clearly than my own parents could. His letter was the anchor I needed. It gave me the strength to endure my parents' Cold War. I did not crawl back. I did not apologize for wanting to know my own story. I simply waited. And I began to correspond with my brother. Our emails, at first, were a slow, careful exchange of biographical data. We were 2 historians, cautiously, respectfully, piecing together the 2 halves of a story that had been torn apart at birth. We exchanged life stories, summarizing 7 decades in a few paragraphs. We sent pictures of our children, our grandchildren, our late spouses, and then the emails became something more. We discovered a shared, almost comical list of similarities. We both had a lifelong, inexplicable love for the poetry of W.B. Yeats. We both had a strange, specific aversion to the taste of cilantro. We both had the same slightly crooked smile, a feature I had never seen on any other face in my family. We were strangers, and yet we were echoes of each other. A month into our correspondence, he proposed the next step, a phone call. Terrified. To hear his voice, the voice of my brother, felt like a step into a new and unknown world. We scheduled it for a Sunday afternoon. I sat on my lanai, my hands trembling, and I dialed his number. "Hello?" His voice came through the line, a low, gentle baritone. A voice that was both completely unfamiliar and, in some strange cellular way, deeply familiar. "Samuel," I whispered, "it's Eleanor." Oh, we talked for 2 hours. Oh, we talked about everything and nothing, and we laughed. We had the same dry academic sense of humor. For the first time, I was talking to someone who shared not just my genetics, but my way of seeing the world. It was a feeling of homecoming I had never known I was missing. At the end of the call, he said, "We have to meet Eleanor." "No," I said. We decided on a neutral location, a place that was new to both of us, Savannah, Georgia, a city of history, of ghosts, of beautiful, quiet squares. We booked our hotels. We set a date. I did not tell my parents where I was going. I simply told them I was taking a short personal trip for a few days. The silence between us had become a fragile, brittle truce, and I had no desire to shatter it again. Not yet. I chose our meeting place, a simple, unadorned bench in the center of Chippewa Square. I arrived early, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. I sat on the bench under the cool, dappled shade of a massive, ancient oak tree, and I waited. And then I saw him. He was walking towards me from the other side of the square. An old man, a little stooped, with a kind, thoughtful face, and a familiar, lopsided smile. He had my eyes. He walked with the same slightly shuffling gait my own father had. He was a stranger. And he was my brother. He saw me, stopped for a moment, and his own face broke into a smile of pure, unadulterated wonder. He walked the last few feet and stood before me. "Eleanor," he asked, his voice exactly as it had been on the phone. "Samuel," I said. We did not hug. We did not cry. We just stood there for a long, silent moment. Two old people. Two halves of a whole, finally, after 72 years. In the same place at the same time, we sat on that bench and we talked for hours. We talked about our lives, filling in the gaps that our emails had left. He told me stories of his childhood, of his parents, of his late wife. I told him about Richard, about Michael, about my life as a librarian. It was the easiest, most natural conversation I have ever had. And then he reached into his wallet. "My adoptive mother gave this to me when I was old enough to understand," he said, his voice now a low, gentle thing. "She said it was found tucked into my baby blanket at the agency. She always believed it was her." He handed me a small, worn black and white photograph, its edges soft with age. I took it with a trembling hand. It was a studio portrait of a young woman, probably no older than 18. She had a heart-shaped face, a cascade of dark, wavy hair, and my eyes. Expression was a heartbreaking mixture of youthful hope and a deep, profound sadness. I was looking, for the first time, in my life at the face of my own history. I was looking at my mother. I stared at her face, at the face of the young, scared girl who had made an impossible choice, who had given both of her children a chance at a better life. And I felt a wave of love and gratitude for her sacrifice. A feeling so profound it almost took my breath away. I looked up at my brother, at his kind, familiar face, and I knew. I'm back on my lanai now. It's Friday night. My trip to Savannah was a week ago. My relationship with my parents is still a quiet, wounded thing. We are talking again in short, careful phone calls. The healing, if it is to happen, will be slow. I do not know if they will ever truly understand, but as I sit here, I know that I have my answer. The pain I caused them was real, and it is a heavy weight on my heart. But the peace I have found, the quiet, profound sense of wholeness that comes from finally knowing your own story, from seeing your mother's face, from hearing your brother's voice. That is real too. I was not the asshole for wanting to know who I was. I was just a daughter, finally, after 72 years, finding her way home. It's Friday night, and the storm I was watching has finally broken. The rain is coming down in a soft, steady rhythm, washing the world clean. I've been sitting here on my lanai for hours, writing my story, reading the comments from you, the kind, thoughtful strangers of the internet. The verdict has been almost unanimous. NTA, not the asshole. And while I am grateful for the validation, I know that the real verdict, the one that truly matters, was never going to come from a stranger. It had to come from my own small, fractured family. The path from that heartbroken confrontation in my parents' living room to the strange, new, and complicated peace we have now was a long, quiet, and difficult one. After I returned from Savannah, my world split in two. There was my old life, my life with my parents, which was now a landscape of strained, painful silence. They did not call. I did not visit. We were two islands of grief, separated by a sea of their insecurity and my resolve. And then there was my new life, my life with Samuel. We spoke on the phone every Sunday. We exchanged long, rambling emails full of a lifetime of stories that needed to be told. I learned about his childhood in North Carolina, his love for history, his two daughters who were now my nieces. He learned about my life as a librarian, my late husband Richard, my son Michael. With every conversation, the strange, miraculous bond between us grew stronger. He was my brother. And the joy of that discovery was a bright, warm sun, but it was a sun that could not penetrate the cold, sad fog that had descended over my relationship with my parents, the bridge between my two worlds. The person who finally dared to cross the divide was my son, Michael. He had been caught in the middle of this silent war, loving both his mother and his grandparents. And the strain was breaking his heart. He called me one afternoon, a few months after my trip to Savannah. "Mom," he said, his voice heavy, "just came from visiting Grandpa and Grandma. They're not doing well. They're heartbroken. They feel like they've lost you." "I haven't gone anywhere, Michael," I said, the familiar ache in my own heart flaring up. "They're the ones who shut me out." "I know," he said, "and I told them that. I told them they were being unfair. I told them that your wanting to know your brother has absolutely nothing to do with your love for them. I told them that their fear was going to achieve the very thing they were afraid of. It was going to push you away for good." He paused. "And Mom, I told them about Samuel. I told them he's a retired history professor. I told them he's a widower. I told them he's a kind, gentle man who just wanted to know that his sister had had a good life. It was a risky move to try and humanize the faceless threat they had built up in their minds. But Michael was a good lawyer. He knew how to make a case. And then he issued an ultimatum of his own. His 50th birthday was in a month. I told them," he said, his voice firm, "that I was inviting both you and my great-uncle Samuel to my party, and I told them that it was the most important birthday of my life, and that the only gift I wanted was for our entire, strange, new, complicated family to be in the same room together, even if it was just for one day." The weeks leading up to Michael's party were the most anxious of my life. My parents had, to my astonishment, agreed to come. Samuel, who understood the profound significance of the gesture, had booked a flight from North Carolina. I was terrified. I imagined a scene of stiff, awkward silence, of my parents glaring at my brother, of a family drama that would ruin my son's milestone birthday. The party was at Michael's beautiful home in a suburb of Tampa. The house was filled with his friends, his colleagues, his life. It was a happy, neutral territory. I arrived early. My parents arrived a few minutes later. They were polite to me, but their smiles were brittle, their movements stiff. We were orbiting each other in a state of fragile, temporary truce. And then he arrived. Samuel, I saw him get out of his taxi. Looking a little lost, a kind elderly man in a new sports coat he had clearly bought for the occasion. I went to him and we hugged, a real hug this time. The first one of our lives, and then together. We walked over to my parents. They were standing by the fireplace, two frail, proud, and terrified 90-year-olds. I made the introduction, my voice trembling slightly. Mom, Dad, I said, I would like you to meet my brother, Samuel Burke. My father, Robert, just nodded stiffly, his face a mask of stone. My mother, Mary, looked like she was about to cry. The air was thick with 72 years of unspoken fear. And then Samuel, my gentle, wise historian of a brother, did the one thing I had not expected. He did not talk about himself. He talked about them. He stepped forward, his eyes full of a deep and utterly genuine sincerity. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, he began, his voice a low, gentle rumble. I know that my appearance in Eleanor's life has caused you a great deal of pain, and for that I am truly and deeply sorry. The last thing I ever wanted to do was to disrupt the beautiful life you have all built together. He looked from my mother's face to my father's. But I need you to understand something, he continued. I have spent my entire adult life with a question mark in my heart. A quiet, constant wonder about what happened to my little sister. I wondered if she was safe, if she was happy. And most of all, I wondered if she was loved. He smiled then. A beautiful, kind, and lopsided smile that was so much like my own. And then I finally met her. And I saw this incredible, intelligent, and profoundly kind and decent woman. And I heard the stories of the life she has lived. Oh, life full of love, of opportunity, of unwavering support. A life full of ponies on her 5th birthday. He glanced at me, a twinkle in his eye. And I knew Michael had shared my stories with him. You didn't just give my sister a life, he said, his voice now thick with emotion. You gave her a beautiful life. You gave her the life our own mother could only have dreamed of for her. And the brother who never had a chance to know her. I want to thank you for that. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for raising my sister. You did a magnificent job, he had finished. The room was silent. He had not come as a threat. He had come as an admirer. He had come to thank them for their life's work. He had not tried to claim a piece of me. He had validated their claim on me, and with that single profound and unexpected act of grace, the fortress of their fear, the one they had been building for 72 years, just crumbled. My mother, her face a mess of streaming tears, reached out a trembling hand and took Samuel's. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing that. My father, his own eyes now glistening, just nodded, a lifetime of insecurity and fear, finally, blessedly, washing away. I'm sitting on my lanai now, on this rainy Friday night in August. My story is finished. Michael's 50th birthday party was the beginning of our own new beginning. My two families, the one I was born to and the one I was given. have started the slow, awkward, and beautiful process of becoming one. My parents and Samuel have a quiet, respectful friendship. They trade stories. They have discovered to their mutual delight that they all share a deep and abiding love for a good, competitive game of bridge. The family tree my son wanted to build is now on the wall in his study. It's a strange and complex looking thing with new branches grafted onto old ones. But it's whole. It's complete. It's our story. All of it. I know that the pain I caused my parents was real. Do not diminish it. But I also know that it was the only way through. I had to choose my own truth, even if it hurt them, so that we could all finally arrive at a larger, more complete, and more honest version of our family. So, Reddit, I have my answer. I was not the asshole for wanting to know who I was. I was just a daughter and a sister finally finding a way to bring all the pieces of her own strange and beautiful history home.